Upon accepting a job as a maid in a silent mansion, a woman believes she is merely starting life anew, but discovers that the blind twins living there hold a secret capable of defying science, reigniting her past and forever transforming the fate of that family. If you enjoy stories like this, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave your comment saying where you're listening from. The rain fell incessantly on Hyde Park Gardens, an upscale neighborhood in London. Lucy Rivers adjusted her grey uniform as she waited at the imposing gate of the Albright mansion, one of the country's greatest fortunes. She held her faded umbrella firmly with one hand, and with the other, the recommendation letter from the employment agency. At 42, with brown hair always tied in a discreet bun, almond-shaped eyes that hid stories no one in that mansion could imagine, Lucy seemed like just another domestic worker seeking a livelihood in the big city. The intercom rang 3 times before a deep, impatient male voice authorized her entry. Punctuality. Good sign. The tall, rigid-postured man received her in the entrance hall. I am Robert Caldwell, administrator of Mr. Edward Albright's residence. You must be Lucy, the new cleaning staff. Lucy nodded. The interior of the mansion was sumptuous and cold at the same time. Imported furniture, original artworks, and a disturbing silence for a house where, according to the agency, children lived. The rules are simple, Robert continued as he led her through the endless corridors. The upstairs is restricted. You will only go up to clean when authorized. Mr. Albright is rarely home and prefers total discretion. The twins, he paused as if carefully choosing his words, the master's children require special care. Their nanny takes care of that. Your job is simply to keep everything impeccable, without making noise, without asking questions. Lucy listened carefully to the instructions about permitted cleaning products, work hours, and designated areas. As Robert spoke, her eyes scanned the surroundings. There was something melancholic about all that wealth. Any questions? Robert asked, ending the tour. No, sir. Excellent. Start with the living room. Mr. Albright is receiving guests tonight. Lucy worked in silence throughout the morning. Her movements were precise, methodical, the result of years of discipline. Not domestic discipline, but of another nature far removed from here. As she cleaned, she observed the details. The absent photographs on the walls, the lack of scattered toys, the impeccably organized library. It was a house without marks of life. Around noon, Lucy heard a different sound, a small child's laugh, followed by hurried footsteps upstairs. Instinctively, she looked up at the ceiling, feeling her heart quicken. They rarely leave their room, a soft voice said behind her. Lucy turned and found a woman of approximately 60, simply dressed. Grey hair and a gentle smile on her wrinkled face. I'm Mrs. Teresa, the cook, she introduced herself. You must be the new staff member. Lucy, she replied with a nod. Mr. Albright's children. How old are they? Michael and Raphael are 3 years old. Mrs. Teresa lowered her voice. Beautiful boys, but they were born blind, poor things. The master hires specialists, famous doctors, but so far, she sighed. Come have lunch, you must be hungry. In the kitchen, Lucy found other staff members. Mr. Anthony, the gardener with calloused hands and an easy smile. Marcia, the laundress who spoke little and worked much. And Jane, a young woman who managed the pantry and served guests when needed. Each had their story, their place in that silent mechanism. And the boy's nanny? Lucy asked, trying to appear merely curious. Miss Paula? She rarely comes down for meals, Mrs. Teresa replied. She spends all day with the twins. A dedicated young woman, trained in special education. She's the 6th in 2 years. The others couldn't handle the pressure from Mr. Edward. Lunch proceeded with pleasant conversation. Lucy spoke little, answering only what was necessary about her past. She said she had come from rural Wiltshire, had worked in other family homes, half-truths that concealed an entire lifetime. In the afternoon, as she cleaned the library, Lucy was surprised by the sudden arrival of the master. Edward Albright entered like a storm, ignoring her presence. Tall, athletically built, in his 40s, he wore an impeccably cut suit and had a stern expression, as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Robert!" he called loudly. "We need to cancel dinner tonight. I have to travel to Edinburgh immediately." The administrator appeared in seconds, as if always lurking. "Has something happened, sir? Petrocorp is having problems with the merger. I need to be there personally." Edward paced back and forth. And the boy's new evaluation? Has the doctor given his opinion yet? It arrived this morning. Robert handed him a folder. The conclusions are the same, sir. Edward took the documents and quickly flipped through them. His face hardened even more. Damn it! He exclaimed, throwing the folder onto the table. 3 years of consultations, experimental treatments, and nothing changes. Perhaps it's time to accept that they never will. Noticing Lucy's presence, he stopped abruptly. Who are you? He asked sharply. The new cleaning staff, sir. Lucy Rivers. He examined her for an instant, as if assessing an object. Continue your work and forget what you heard here. With those words, he left the library, leaving behind only the echo of his frustration. Robert cast a warning glance at Lucy before following his employer. When she was alone, Lucy could not resist the temptation. She approached the table and discreetly examined the papers left there. Medical reports, neurological evaluations, technical terms that most people wouldn't understand, but which were as familiar to her as a second language. Her eyes quickly scanned the lines. Congenital blindness, intact optic nerves, theoretical potential for visual development through adequate stimulation. Lucy's heart quickened. Those words awakened memories, passions, and old wounds she had tried to bury for years. 6 years earlier, in a crowded auditorium at King's College London, Dr. Lucy Rivers, a neuroscientist and specialist in child sensory development, presented her revolutionary research. Neuroplasticity in children with congenital visual impairment can be enhanced through a specific protocol of synchronized, multisensory stimulation, she explained confidently. To an audience of international specialists, our preliminary results suggest that, in cases where the optic nerves are preserved, there is a possibility of developing functional visual perception. Applause, recognition, interviews. Her innovative methodology attracted global attention, research funding, invitations to speak. The peak of her career. Determined to transform her research into accessible treatment, Lucy invested all her savings and considerable loans into creating the Rivers Institute for Child Neuroplasticity. But the transition from respected researcher to entrepreneur proved disastrous. Without management experience, she trusted dishonest partners. In less than 2 years, the institute plunged into debt. Accusations of charlatanism arose, of creating false hopes in desperate families. An especially cruel report portrayed her as a scientist who had traded ethics for profit. The bankruptcy process took with it her reputation, her assets, her apartment. Some colleagues tried to help, but the damage was done. Depressed and humiliated, Lucy disappeared from the academic world. In the following years, she survived on temporary jobs, constantly moving, avoiding her own name. Now, faced with those medical reports, something reignited. Lucy quickly concealed the papers when she heard approaching footsteps. She returned to cleaning the shelves, feigning indifference. At night, in her small room at the back of the mansion, she couldn't sleep. The images from the reports mingled with memories of her research. What if the children were ideal candidates for her methodology? What if she could, anonymously, make a difference in those boys' lives? The fear of failure wrestled with the impulse to help, against the possibility of redemption. The next day, defying all rules, Lucy found an excuse to go upstairs when Robert was busy with suppliers. She needed to see the twins just once, just to confirm her suspicions. The upstairs corridor was quiet and well lit. She followed until she heard children's voices. She stopped before a slightly ajar door and peeked in. The room was large, painted in light tones with toys organized on the shelves. In the center, sitting on a colorful rug, were Michael and Raphael, identical with their dark hair and unfocused eyes, moving their fingers over books with raised textures. Beside them, a young woman, probably Miss Paula, monotonously read instructions from a manual. She seemed to follow a rigid protocol, without enthusiasm or creativity. The boys responded mechanically, without the natural joy of childhood. Lucy felt a pang in her chest. That method was decades outdated. The children were not being challenged, not stimulated correctly. They were only receiving the basics to develop survival skills, not to explore their full potential. As she was about to step away, her foot made a floorboard creak. The nanny immediately looked up. "Who's there?" Excuse me. Lucy entered, feigning embarrassment. I'm the new cleaning staff. Robert asked me to check if the curtains in this room need washing. Paula looked at her with suspicion. The curtains are cleaned monthly. There's no need to check now. Who is it? Asked one of the boys, turning his face towards the door. No one. Important, Michael, just the cleaner, Paula replied dismissively. She smells different, said the other twin, Raphael. Smells like lavender. Lucy smiled. It's my soap, she replied gently, approaching. You have a very good sense of smell. You speak differently too, Michael observed. Enough interruptions, Paula cut in. We have to finish our lesson before lunch. Reluctantly, Lucy left the room, but not before noticing, forgotten under a piece of furniture, the corner of a blue-covered notebook. Something about it caught her attention, but she didn't have time to investigate. That night, when everyone was asleep, Lucy silently returned to the boys' room. Her heart pounded as she carefully opened the door. In the dark, guided only by the moonlight streaming through the window, she searched for the notebook she had seen earlier. She found it under the dresser and picked it up carefully to avoid making noise. It was a diary. On the first page, an inscription. Observations on Michael and Raphael Albright, Dr. Caroline Meadows, child neuropsychologist. Trembling, Lucy took the diary to her room. She sat on the small bed and turned on the bedside lamp. The yellowed pages revealed much more than simple professional notes. They were the testament of a passionate scientist who had been abruptly dismissed just over a year ago. March 15th, I tried to implement Dr. Rivers' multi-sensory stimulation protocol, but was severely reprimanded by Mr. Albright. He insists on conventional methods, despite recent advances in the field. Lucy swallowed hard. Dr. Caroline was trying to apply her methodology. She turned a few more pages. April 2nd. The twins respond surprisingly well to synchronized stimuli. When I use light, sound, and touch simultaneously, their pupils dilate. There is significant neural activity. I am sure that with persistence. April 12th. Robert found me applying the experimental protocol. He threatened to tell Mr. Albright. I tried to explain the scientific fundamentals, but he doesn't want to hear about experiments with the boys. April 30th. I was informed today that my services are no longer needed. They didn't even allow me to say goodbye to Michael and Raphael. 3 months of work wasted. I leave this diary hidden in the hope that the next professional can continue what I started. These boys have potential. Their brains are ready. They just need the right approach. Lucy closed the diary, stunned. A colleague had tried to follow her work and had been dismissed for it. This explained Paula's defensive behavior and Robert's rigidity. The Albright mansion was a minefield of internal politics and outdated methods. For days, Lucy debated internally. Intervening would mean risking her job and facing the ghost of failure again. Abstaining would be denying help to children who could benefit from her knowledge. The question consumed her as she performed her household tasks, always attentive to the sounds from upstairs, always seeking small glimpses of the twins. One Saturday afternoon, when most of the staff were off, Lucy made a decision. She needed guidance, someone who could help her reorganize her ideas, someone who knew her before her fall. She took a bus to the Islington neighborhood and walked to an old brick building. She took a deep breath before ringing the doorbell of apartment 302. "Who is it?" asked a female voice through the intercom. "It's me, Professor. Lucy." There was a moment of silence, followed by the buzz of the door opening. On the 3rd floor, a white-haired woman with an elegant posture awaited her. Dr. Clara Maxwell, a retired neuroscientist and Lucy's former doctoral supervisor, received her with a tight embrace. "My dear," she said with a choked voice, 6 years without news. I thought you had left the country." The apartment was cozy, filled with books and plants. They sat in the living room while Clara prepared coffee. Lucy observed the photographs on the walls, many of them showing her younger, at conferences and graduations, alongside her mentor. "You completely disappeared," Clara commented, returning with 2 steaming cups. "We tried to find you when opportunities for rehabilitation in academia arose." "Rehabilitation?" Lucy laughed humorlessly. "After that article in The Guardian, that lawsuit, who would take me back?" "Many of us. We knew you were a victim of unscrupulous partners, not the architect of a scam." Clara sighed. "Your research was solid, Lucy. It continues to be a reference in the field." Those words fell like balm on open wounds. For years, Lucy had carried not only the weight of financial bankruptcy, but also the belief that her work had been discredited. Gradually, she told her old mentor about her current job, the Albright twins, the found diary, and her moral dilemma. Clara listened to her attentively, without interruption. When Lucy finished, the professor stood up and went to her bookshelf. She returned with a recent academic volume. Neuroplasticity and Visual Development in Children with Congenital Impairment, she read the title. See Chapter 12. Lucy opened to the indicated page and found her own name in several citations. A Japanese study had replicated part of her methodology with promising results. Her work had not been forgotten or discredited. On the contrary, it had inspired new lines of research. "Science advances, Lucy, even when its pioneers stumble," Clara said gently. "What happened with the Institute was a financial and personal tragedy for you, but it did not invalidate your scientific contribution." "What should I do, Professor? Those children." "What does your scientist's heart say?" Clara smiled. "You were always driven by curiosity and compassion in equal measure. That's what made you special." Lucy returned to the Albright mansion renewed, carrying in her bag not only the diary, but also recent scientific articles that Clara had given her. A plan was forming in her mind. She couldn't announce herself as a specialist, nor directly confront the established methods in the house. She would need to be subtle, gradual. She began observing the twins' routine more closely. She noticed that every Thursday, Paula would leave for 2 hours for a meeting with the children's neurologist, leaving them in the care of Marcia, the laundress, who simply put them on to listen to audio stories while performing other tasks. The following Thursday, Lucy offered to replace Marcia. "You always seem tired on this day," she told her colleague. "I can stay with the boys while I finish cleaning their room." Marcia readily accepted, grateful for the unexpected break. Thus, Lucy found herself alone with the twins for the first time. She felt nervous, like in the early days of clinical research, years ago. "Mrs. Lucy?" Michael recognized her perfume immediately. "Is it really you?" "Yes, it's me," she replied, surprised by the boy's keen olfactory memory. "Are you going to tell stories like Marcia?" Raphael asked. "Actually, I thought of something different today." Lucy took out some objects she had carefully gathered from her bag. "Do you like discovering new things by touch?" For the next hour, Lucy conducted an apparently simple game of tactile identification. Objects of different textures, temperatures, and shapes were presented to the boys, who were asked to describe them. But there was an additional component that the children didn't perceive. Each object was accompanied by a luminous stimulus indirectly directed at their eyes. "This is smooth and cold," Michael said, holding a small marble slab. "Very good," Lucy praised, discreetly shining a flashlight with a blue filter towards the boy's face. "And can you feel anything else besides the touch? Perhaps a different sensation near your eyes?" Michael frowned in concentration. "There's something, I can't explain it. A pressure." "I feel it too," Raphael exclaimed when his object was accompanied by light. "It's like something is near, but I can't grasp it." Lucy controlled her excitement. It was exactly the kind of response she was looking for. The optic nerves were reacting, sending signals that the children's brains were trying to interpret without prior visual references. It was the first step in a long process. At the end of the session, Lucy carefully tidied everything, ensuring there was no evidence of her special game, as she called it for the boys. "Can we play again next Thursday?" Raphael asked hopefully. "If you promise it will be our secret," Lucy replied. "Some people don't understand special games like ours." The twins enthusiastically agreed, delighted with the idea of a secret shared with the friendly staff member. In the following weeks, Lucy established a routine. On Thursdays, she conducted progressively more complex exercises, always combining tactile or auditory stimuli with carefully calibrated visual stimuli. On other occasions, she would accidentally Leave special toys, which emitted soft sounds and indirect lights, near the boys during her cleaning tasks. The results began to appear subtly. Paula, the nanny, commented intrigued during dinner that the twins seemed to be developing a sixth sense for spatial localization. Yesterday, Michael managed to point exactly to the window when I asked where. The sound of the birds was coming from, she recounted, and Raphael has been turning his face towards colorful objects even before touching them. Children have an incredible capacity for adaptation, Mrs. Teresa commented, unaware of how right she was. Lucy kept a detailed diary of her observations, hidden in her room. She documented every small progress, every reaction, every new exercise. Sometimes, when everyone was asleep, she studied Clara's scientific articles, adapting protocols to the limited conditions she had. After 2 months of discreet interventions, Lucy decided it was time to advance to the next phase. One Sunday, when Mr. Anthony was tending the garden, she approached him. "Mr. Anthony, may I ask you something?" The gardener, a man of few words and much wisdom, nodded as he pruned a rose bush. If someone wanted to access the boys' room without going through the main corridor, would there be an alternative path? Mr. Anthony stopped his work and stared at her with perceptive eyes. Why would a cleaner be interested in alternative paths in a house that isn't hers? Lucy hesitated. She could invent an excuse, but something in the old gardener's expression made her opt for sincerity. "Because perhaps I'm not just a cleaner, and perhaps those boys need more help than they're currently receiving." A long silence followed. Finally, Mr. Anthony returned to pruning his roses. "The West Wing has an old service staircase, from the days when this was a farmhouse. It's behind the large pantry. The door looks like a closet, but it leads to the attic, which connects to the guest room's closet next to the boys' room." He paused. "The key is hidden under the maidenhair fern pot. No one has used that passage in years." "Why are you telling me this?" Lucy asked, surprised by the ease of the answer. Mr. Anthony smiled faintly. "Because I recognize eyes that want to do good, Dr. Rivers." Lucy's heart froze. "How?" "My granddaughter was born with a rare syndrome. 6 years ago, she was a patient at your institute, before everything fell apart. Those were the happiest 3 months of her life." The old gardener looked her in the eyes. "I never forgot your face. When you arrived here, I thought it was a coincidence. Then I started to notice the change in the boys. Mr. Anthony, you don't need to explain. Just be careful with Robert. He is the master's eyes and ears. And if you're going to use that passage, Monday and Thursday nights are the best times. That's when he does the accounting in the office and doesn't go upstairs for anything." That conversation was a turning point. With Mr. Anthony's silent help, Lucy was able to intensify her intervention. Using the secret passage, she visited the boys when everyone was asleep, introducing more advanced exercises, precise sounds combined with specific lights, synchronization of temperatures with colors, recognition of shapes through shadows. Paula noticed the changes, but attributed them to natural development and the effectiveness of her own methods. The twins, delighted with their progress and with the secret friend who visited them at night, remained discreet, turning everything into a great adventure. One Sunday morning, almost 3 months after the interventions began, Lucy was in the garden, helping Mr. Anthony with some plants that would be used in the next phase of sensory stimulation, when an imported car parked at the entrance. Edward Albright had returned from a long business trip. "Are the boys' monthly reports ready?" he asked Robert as soon as he entered the house, without even greeting the staff. "Has there been any significant change?" "Actually, sir," Robert replied with an intrigued expression. "Ms. Paula reported some unusual progress. The boys seem to be developing a kind of enhanced spatial perception." Edward's face lit up with an expression that mixed hope and skepticism. "I want to see them now." Lucy watched from afar as the master quickly ascended the stairs. Her heart quickened. The twins' progress was real, but they were still far from the stage where she could definitively prove the effectiveness of her method. It was too early for a formal evaluation. Half an hour later, Edward came down with an enigmatic expression. He called Robert for a private conversation in his office. Through the kitchen window, Lucy could see the 2 men gesticulating. The administrator seemed defensive, while the master showed alternating signs of excitement and distrust. "What do you think is happening?" Mrs. Teresa asked, approaching the window. The master must be surprised by the boy's progress, Mr. Anthony commented calmly. Perhaps he's questioning why he wasn't informed earlier. Lucy felt a chill of apprehension. If Edward decided to bring in specialists to evaluate the twins now, before the process was further advanced, all her work could be discredited. At the end of the day, Robert gathered all the staff in the living room. By order of Mr. Albright, starting tomorrow we will have a medical team visiting the residence regularly, he announced formally. Doctors Maurice and Eliza Foster will be here to assess the recent progress of the young masters. Everyone must provide full cooperation and discretion. His eyes lingered for an instant on Lucy, especially in the restricted areas of the house. That night, Lucy couldn't sleep. She had worked so hard, advanced so much, only to now see the entire process potentially compromised by a premature evaluation. She needed to accelerate the protocol before the specialists arrived. Using the secret passage, she went to the boys' room well after midnight. She found them sleeping peacefully. Carefully, so as not to startle them, she gently woke them up. "Lucy," Michael murmured, recognizing her touch. "Is it time for the special game?" "Yes, dear. Today we're going to try something new, something very important." Morning arrived too quickly. Lucy had worked with the twins until 3 in the morning, intensifying the visual stimulation exercises. She was exhausted, but satisfied with the results. The boys had managed, for the first time, to consistently identify the direction of a light source without using touch or hearing as a reference. "It's like I feel the warmth on my face," Raphael explained, pointing almost perfectly at the small flashlight Lucy was holding. "I see something," Michael hesitated, searching for words to describe a sensation never before experienced. "It's not dark like always. It's different." Now, as she prepared breakfast in the kitchen with Mrs. Teresa, Lucy tried to disguise her tiredness and anxiety. Through the window, she saw an elegant black car park at the main entrance. A middle-aged couple stepped out. The man, tall and academic-looking, carried a medical bag. The woman, with grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, carried a document folder. The specialists had arrived. "They say they're the best pediatric ophthalmologists in London," Mrs. Teresa commented. Dr. Maurice was a professor at King's College London and now has a clinic in Mayfair. His wife is a specialist in rare diseases. "You seem to know a lot about them," Lucy observed, trying to keep her tone casual. "The master brought them here a few times before. They always leave with the same disappointed look, poor things." The cook sighed. "I hope this time it's different." Robert received the doctors and immediately led them to the second floor. Edward Albright, who was already waiting for them in the hall, followed them with a tense expression. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. During the following hours, Lucy performed her usual tasks with thinly disguised distraction. She cleaned the same vase 3 times, organized already organized books, all while trying to catch any sound or movement coming from upstairs. Around noon, the twins' room door finally opened. Adult voices discussed in controlled tones as they descended the stairs. Lucy discreetly approached the corridor, pretending to clean a painting to overhear the conversation. "I'm not saying it's impossible," Dr. Maurice was saying. "I'm saying it's extraordinary and inexplicable with the conventional methods that have been applied." "I agree," Dr. Eliza spoke in a lower tone. "The pupillary responses, the rudimentary visual tracking, something has changed significantly in just 3 months. The nanny assures me she has followed the established protocol exactly." Edward seemed confused. "With all due respect, Mr. Albright," the doctor continued, "the protocol we reviewed 6 months ago could not produce this kind of progress. There is something else going on." The group entered the office and closed the door, cutting off the rest of the conversation. Lucy felt a mix of pride and fear. The results were visible, undeniable, but now the questions would begin. In the afternoon, she was called to the office. Her heart pounded as she entered the room where Edward, Robert, and the couple of doctors awaited her. "This is Lucy, the staff member we hired about 3 months ago," Robert introduced coldly. Dr. Eliza assessed her with a clinical gaze. Coincidentally, the same period in which they noticed changes in the boys. "Do you have regular contact with my children?" Edward asked directly. Lucy swallowed hard. "Only during the cleaning of their room, sir. And sometimes, when Miss Paula needs a break, I help them with some simple activity." "What kind of activities?" Dr. Maurice pressed. Object identification games, stories, things like that, she replied, remaining partially honest. Edward watched her intently. Have you noticed any changes in their behavior? They seem more curious, sir, more attentive to their surroundings. But I imagine that's natural with development. A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, Edward dismissed her, but not before adding, if you know of anything unusual happening with my children, I expect to be informed immediately. Lucy nodded and left, feeling Robert's gaze burning into her back. In the corridor, she found Paula waiting nervously. What did they want? The nanny asked. Just information about the boys' routine. Are they blaming me for what's happening? Paula seemed genuinely concerned. I have strictly followed Mr. Albright's approved methods. I don't understand how the twins are progressing so quickly. Lucy felt a pang of guilt. Paula was just a professional following orders, fearing for her job. No one is blaming you, she assured her. On the contrary, it seems they are impressed with the results. It's strange, Paula lowered her voice. Yesterday, Raphael managed to find a toy that fell from the bed without fumbling on the floor as he normally would. He simply looked in the right direction and picked it up, as if he could see. The comment left Lucy uneasy. Things were progressing faster than she had anticipated. Was it time to be more cautious or to intensify her efforts? The decision was made for her when, that night, Robert knocked on her door. Mr. Albright wants to speak with you. Now. The office was lit only by a desk lamp when she entered. Edward, seated behind his imposing mahogany desk, indicated the chair in front of him. There was no sign of Robert or the doctors. Sit down, Lucy. She obeyed, preparing for the worst. First of all, he began, I want you to know that I installed cameras in my children's room 2 weeks ago, discreet cameras, which even record in the dark. Lucy's stomach dropped. It was all over. So, Edward continued, I know exactly what you've been doing at night. Mr. Albright, I can explain. He raised his hand, interrupting her. I don't want explanations yet. I want to know who you really are, because the woman I see in those recordings is not a simple cleaner. She is someone with specialized knowledge, applying sophisticated sensory stimulation techniques. Lucy felt there was no turning back. Taking a deep breath, she decided to reveal the truth. My real name is Dr. Lucy Rivers. I was a researcher in the field of neuroplasticity and sensory development in children with congenital visual impairment. 6 years ago, after the bankruptcy of my institute and a media scandal, I disappeared from academic circles. Edward showed no surprise, just nodded slightly. Continue. When I came to work here, I didn't know about your children. I discovered by chance, and then I found Dr. Caroline's diary. I realized that the twins were ideal candidates for the methodology I developed. I couldn't resist the temptation to help. And why didn't you introduce yourself properly? Why all these secret night visits? Because my name is tainted in the scientific community. Because I feared you would reject me without giving me a chance to prove my method works. Because, she hesitated, because I couldn't bear another failure. Edward stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the night. Do you know why I hired so many specialists over the years? He asked without waiting for an answer. Because I refused to accept that my children would live forever in darkness. Because I promised their mother, before she left us, that I would do everything in my power so they could see the world. Lucy noticed the emotion in his voice. For the first time she saw the man beyond the ruthless magnate. Official science told me it was impossible, that we should focus on adaptation, not cure. Edward turned to face her. And then you, working in the shadows, achieved more in 3 months than teams of specialists in 3 years. A heavy silence fell upon them. Finally, Edward returned to his desk and opened a folder. I spent the day researching you, Dr. Rivers. I read your articles, your background. I spoke with former colleagues of yours. The story I found was of a brilliant scientist, passionate about her work, who made administrative errors, not scientific ones. He looked at her directly. Your methods were controversial, but they were never discredited by scientific evidence. What do you intend to do now? Lucy asked, still uncertain about her fate. Offer you a contract, not as a cleaner, but as a sensory development specialist for my children. With freedom to apply your method, adequate resources, and of course a salary commensurate with your qualifications. Lucy blinked, astonished. Are you serious? I've never been more serious in my life, but I have conditions. Edward leaned over the table. First, total transparency from now on. I want to understand every step of the process, every technique applied. Second, scientifically documented results. Doctors Maurice and Eliza will supervise the progress, but you will have methodological autonomy. Third, absolute discretion. I don't want to create false hopes or premature media exposure. And Robert? He clearly distrusts me. Robert no longer works here, Edward replied dryly. His loyalty is admirable, but his resistance to new methods cost my children precious time. Lucy's head spun. In a matter of minutes, she had gone from an employee about to be dismissed to a contracted specialist. It was a second chance she had never expected to receive. I accept your conditions, she finally replied, but I also have a requirement. I need total freedom to form my support team. Edward nodded. Who do you have in mind? To start, Mr. Anthony. He knows my work and has been a silent ally. As for Paula. She already resigned, Edward informed. Apparently she felt inadequate in the face of the boys' inexplicable progress. Ironically, it was her departure that accelerated my investigation. The next morning, the Albright mansion seemed a completely different place. A room on the second floor was transformed into an improvised sensory laboratory. Equipment began to arrive. Special lights, sound generators, projectors. Lucy, now officially Dr. Rivers, coordinated everything with renewed energy. Mr. Anthony was promoted to therapy assistant, responsible for developing a sensory garden specially designed for the twins. Mrs. Teresa received instructions to prepare meals that stimulated all the children's senses, with varied textures and aromas. Doctors Maurice and Eliza, initially skeptical, soon became enthusiasts of Lucy's methodology. The combination of their clinical experience with her innovative approach created a productive synergy. It's fascinating how the brain redirects resources when adequately stimulated, Dr. Maurice commented, observing the results of a functional MRI scan of the twins. The synchronization of stimuli is key, Lucy explained. When we simultaneously present a sound, a light, and a specific texture, we create a powerful neural association that activates visual areas normally dormant in cases of congenital blindness. Days turned into weeks. Edward, who previously spent most of his time traveling, now worked predominantly from home, following every new development. His relationship with his children, once distant and permeated with frustration, blossomed into moments of genuine connection. I never imagined I'd see my father cry, Raphael commented one afternoon, after Edward had been moved to tears seeing his son correctly identify the color of an object. Strong people cry too, Lucy replied, especially when they are very happy. Despite the progress, not everything was smooth sailing. There were days of setbacks, moments of frustration. Michael developed more quickly than Raphael, creating a temporary imbalance that needed careful management. There were also occasional headaches in the boys, a natural consequence of the intense neural work which worried everyone. Their brains are literally building new roads, Lucy explained to Edward during an evening meeting. It's a process that demands energy and can be uncomfortable, but it's temporary and necessary. I trust you, he replied simply. Words that, coming from such a controlling man, meant a great deal. Edward's trust was more than professional. During the long nights of work, the discussions about the boys' progress, the small victories celebrated together, something more began to blossom between them. A mutual respect that gradually took on the contours of admiration and perhaps something deeper. You've transformed this house, he said one evening, as they shared coffee after a particularly productive day. Not just for what you're doing for the boys, but for the spirit you've brought. It had been years since these walls witnessed laughter. Lucy smiled, touched. They are extraordinary children. They just needed the opportunity to show it. And I needed someone to show me how to be a real father, Edward admitted, with a vulnerability rarely shown. That moment of connection was interrupted by the intercom. It was late at night. Unexpected visitors. The new administrative assistant hired after Robert's departure announced, "Mr. Albright, there's a team from Science Today magazine at the entrance. They say they have information about a revolutionary treatment for congenital blindness being developed here." Edward and Lucy exchanged alarmed glances. The news had leaked somehow. "How did they find out?" Edward asked, tense. "I don't know, but we need to decide how to proceed," Lucy replied. "Premature media exposure can be detrimental, but completely ignoring them could lead to even worse speculation." Edward thought for a moment. "Tell them there are no comments at the moment, but that we will contact them for a possible exclusive story when the results are consolidated." After the assistant relayed the message and the journalists left, Edward and Lucy gathered the small team for a serious conversation. Someone had broken the confidentiality agreement. Everyone vehemently denied it, and it was difficult to determine the source of the leak. It could have been Robert, Mr. Anthony suggested. He was not at all pleased with his dismissal. Or it could have been an equipment supplier, Dr. Maurice added. "We ordered quite specific materials." Regardless of the source, the leak created new pressure. Edward decided to hire additional security, and the project, previously conducted in an almost familial atmosphere, took on an air of stricter secrecy. For Lucy, the situation brought painful memories of her previous experience. The fear of public exposure, of the possibility of seeing her. Work again distorted by the media began to trouble her. What if it all happens again? She confided to Mrs. Teresa, who had become a confidant. What if they turn my work into sensationalism, into exaggerated promises? "This time it's different," the cook consoled her. "You're not alone. You have a team, you have Mr. Edwards' support, and most importantly, you have real results." As the team dealt with the external threat, the twins continued to progress. In the 5th week of intensive treatment, a significant moment occurred. During an exercise with colored lights, Michael suddenly pointed to a red sphere and exclaimed, "It's warm, not with my hands but with my eyes." It was the first truly visual description he could articulate. Red, due to its wavelength, was often the first color to be distinguished in cases of visual recovery. Everyone in the room fell silent, absorbing the significance of that moment. Raphael, inspired by his brother, intensified his efforts. Although he progressed more slowly, his determination was admirable. "I want to see like Michael sees," he often repeated. On a particularly significant afternoon, Lucy decided to try a more advanced exercise. With Edward's approval and the doctor's supervision, she prepared a special room with controlled stimuli. Water at different temperatures would be sprayed on the boys' faces, while specific lights were projected and synchronized sounds played. "This is the apex of the methodology," she explained to the small group. "The simultaneous combination of all sensory stimuli creates what I call a neural storm, a moment when the brain is forced to integrate all information and can potentially make unprecedented connections." The twins, seated in specially prepared chairs, waited anxiously. Lucy had transformed everything into a great adventure for them, a special mission in search of sight. "Ready for the most important mission of all?" she asked, adjusting the equipment. "Born ready," Michael replied enthusiastically, an expression he had learned from Mr. Anthony. Lucy began the protocol. Lights were turned on in a specific sequence. Perfectly synchronized sounds filled the room. Different textures were presented to the boys' hands. Finally, the crucial moment. With a special spray bottle, Lucy began to apply warm water to the children's faces in a specific pattern. It was at that exact instant that the door burst open violently. Edward Albright entered, followed by a man Lucy didn't initially recognize. "What do you think you're doing?" Edward thundered, his face contorted with fury. "Spraying water on my children's faces?" Lucy froze, the spray bottle still in her hands as drops of water ran down the twins' confused faces. Edward's furious expression left her momentarily speechless. Beside him, she finally recognized the other man. It was Robert, the former administrator, with a triumphant smile on his lips. "I warned you, Mr. Edward," Robert said with satisfaction. "This woman is conducting dangerous experiments on your children. She is using the children as guinea pigs to rehabilitate her failed career." "Father?" Michael called, turning his face towards the voice. Why are you angry? We're almost seeing. It's true, Daddy, Raphael added. Aunt Lucy is helping us find the light. Edward seemed torn between anger and confusion upon hearing his children. Slowly, Lucy placed the spray bottle on the table and approached him. It's not what it looks like, Edward, she said with a firm but gentle voice. This is the final procedure of the protocol we discussed. The temperature-controlled water creates a tactile stimulus that, combined with light and sound, enhances the neural response. You didn't mention you would spray water on their faces, Edward accused. I did mention it. In the complete documentation I gave you 2 weeks ago. It's on page 12, section Integrated Multisensory Stimulation. Lucy remained calm despite her racing heart. Doctors Morris and Eliza approved the procedure. You also signed the authorization. He probably didn't read the technical details, Robert interjected with disdain. And that's exactly how charlatans like her operate, hiding questionable procedures amidst incomprehensible scientific jargon. The doctors, who had been observing the scene stunned, finally spoke up. Dr. Maurice stepped forward. Mr. Albright, I confirm that this procedure was discussed and approved by all of us. It is perfectly safe and has solid scientific backing. And I can testify to the preliminary results, Dr. Eliza added. The boys' pupillary responses and their subjective reports indicate a real gain in visual perception. Edward took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Robert, seeing that he was losing ground, changed tactics. Even if the procedure is safe, this woman lied to all of us from the beginning. She concealed her true identity, her disastrous past. How can you trust someone who builds her presence here on lies? Lucy felt the blow. It was true. She had entered the house under false pretenses, initiated treatment without authorization, manipulated the situation for weeks before being discovered. However noble her intentions, her initial methods had been questionable. You're right, she admitted, surprising everyone. I started with lies. I entered this house as a cleaner, when I should have introduced myself as a scientist. I applied techniques without formal permission, when I should have asked for authorization. I hid my past when I should have been transparent. Lucy turned directly to Edward, ignoring Robert and the doctors. I was afraid. Afraid of being rejected before even trying. Afraid that my tarnished name would close doors for children who could benefit from what I know. But that doesn't justify what I did. And if you want me to leave now, I will understand. A dense silence fell over the room. The twins, sensing the tension, remained quiet, but their hands intertwined in search of mutual support. Daddy, Raphael called after a moment. Aunt Lucy told us that important people don't always do everything right. That the important thing is to fix it when we make mistakes. She made a mistake, but she's fixing it, and she's helping us see the world. The simplicity and wisdom in the child's words touched everyone. Edward looked at his children, then at Lucy, and finally at Robert. Why are you here, Robert? He asked with sudden suspicion. How did you know about this specific procedure? The former administrator hesitated. I have contacts in the house. People concerned about the children's well-being. Or perhaps, Edward narrowed his eyes, you were the one who leaked information to the press recently. Perhaps you're upset about being replaced and want to sabotage our progress. Absurd, Robert protested, but his face had paled. Edward walked slowly until he stood face to face with his former employee. You worked for me for 8 years. In all that time, you hired specialist after specialist, all following safe and approved protocols that led nowhere. Now we are finally seeing real results, and you appear questioning methods that have already been examined and approved by respectable doctors. I'm just concerned about— Get out of my house, Edward interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. If I find out you were the one who leaked information to the press, or if you try to interfere again with my children's treatment, you will face severe legal consequences. Understood? Robert looked around, seeking support and finding none. His face red with humiliation, he cast one last hateful glance at Lucy and hurried out. When the door closed, Edward turned to Lucy. His expression was still grave, but no longer furious. As for you, he said, I want the complete truth, always, about every procedure, every risk, every possibility. No more technical meetings I may not fully understand. No more documentation I may not read carefully enough. I want clear explanations in simple language. They are my children. I promise, Lucy replied sincerely. Total transparency from now on. Edward nodded, then looked at the twins, who were still waiting patiently in their chairs. And this specific procedure, with the water, is it really crucial? It's the final catalyst, Lucy explained. The sensation of water on the face creates a sensory map that helps the brain orient itself spatially, while synchronized visual and auditory stimuli force new neural connections. In preliminary tests, it was the moment we achieved the greatest advancements. Edward hesitated for a moment, then stepped back. Continue, then. I want to see how it works. With her heart still racing, Lucy resumed the procedure. The doctors observed attentively, taking notes. This time, Edward remained in the room, witnessing every step. Lights pulsed softly in specific patterns. Precisely calibrated sounds filled the environment, and warm water was delicately sprayed on the boys' faces, creating a complete sensory stimulus. "What do you feel?" Lucy asked gently. "It's like something is waking up," Michael replied, blinking repeatedly. "I see," dots, Raphael said. "Dots of light. And they move when the sound changes." For almost an hour, Lucy conducted the exercise, adjusting parameters, observing reactions, asking questions. The doctors confirmed positive physiological signs, coordinated pupillary dilation, tracking eye movements, increased activity in the visual areas of the brain monitored by portable equipment. Finally, the moment Lucy had planned as the climax of the exercise arrived. With all stimuli perfectly synchronized, she held a simple object, a small red ball, directly in the boy's visual field. "There's something in my hand," she said. "Can you tell me what it is?" Michael frowned in concentration, his eyes moving in the correct direction. "Something round?" "Yes!" Lucy encouraged, her heart quickening with emotion. "And the color? Can you perceive it?" A long moment of silence followed, as Michael seemed to struggle to interpret information never before experienced. "It's warm, like the sun, like the fire I feel near the fireplace." "Red," Edward whispered almost unconsciously. "He's describing red." Raphael, inspired by his brother, focused with even greater intensity. "I see it too. It's round and warm bright." The entire room held its breath. Dr. Eliza, with trembling hands, furiously wrote down every word. Dr. Maurice checked the equipment, confirming that the brain signals corresponded to what would be expected of real visual processing. "Let's try something else," Lucy proposed, exchanging the red ball for a blue one. "And this?" "Different," Michael replied after a moment. "It's not warm. It's cold like water." "Blue," Edward said, his voice choked. The tests continued with increasingly precise responses. It wasn't perfect vision, far from it. It was rudimentary, imprecise, more sensation than image. But it was undeniably a beginning of visual perception. When the exercise ended, everyone was emotionally exhausted. The twins were taken to rest, accompanied by the doctors who would continue monitoring their responses in the following hours. Lucy and Edward remained alone in the room, absorbing the significance of that moment. "They are really starting to see," he finally said, as if he needed to say it aloud to believe it. "It's just the beginning." Lucy reminded him, cautiously optimistic, "We will need many more sessions, and progress can be uneven. There will be days of advancement and days of apparent regression. But yes, the neural pathway is being created." Edward approached and, in a gesture that surprised them both, took Lucy's hands in his. "How can I thank someone who brings light to my children's eyes?" "It wasn't just my work," she replied, moved. "It was their determination, your faith in them, the incredible team we assembled. It was science and love working together." In that moment, something shifted between them. The professional respect, the mutual admiration that had been silently growing over the past weeks, crystallized into something deeper. Edward leaned in slowly, his gaze seeking permission, and Lucy closed her eyes as their lips met in a soft kiss, laden with promise. In the months that followed, the Albright mansion transformed into a true research and development center. The team was expanded, including more specialists in neuroplasticity and visual rehabilitation. Clara, Lucy's old mentor, joined the group as a senior consultant, bringing decades of experience and knowledge. The twins' progress was meticulously documented. There were, as Lucy had predicted, moments of extraordinary advancement and periods of apparent stagnation. Occasional headaches and fatigue were carefully monitored and managed. but the overall trend was clearly positive. 6 months after the official start of treatment, Michael could identify basic shapes and distinguish between 5 primary colors. Raphael, initially slower, had caught up with his brother and sometimes surpassed him in specific tests. Both developed what specialists called functional vision, not perfect, but sufficient to navigate familiar environments, recognize large objects, and visually interact with the world. "It's like we were born again," Raphael commented one afternoon, while playing in the sensory garden specially designed by Mr. Anthony. "Before it was just dark, and now there are colors, shapes, movement." The relationship between Lucy and Edward flourished parallel to the twins' visual development. What began as a professional partnership deepened into genuine love. Nurtured by mutual respect and admiration, Edward, previously distant and consumed by work, found a new balance, dedicating time both to his children and to his relationship with Lucy. Mrs. Teresa observed everything with a satisfied smile, occasionally commenting to Mr. Anthony, "This house has finally become a home." As the first year of treatment neared its end, Lucy and Edward faced an important decision. Was it time to share their results with the scientific world? "The boys have progressed beyond the most optimistic expectations," Dr. Maurice argued during a strategic meeting. "This protocol could benefit thousands of children globally. But we also need to protect Michael and Raphael from excessive exposure," Dr. Eliza countered. "They are not just clinical cases. They are children who deserve privacy." The discussion extended for weeks. Finally, they reached a compromise. They would publish the results in a respected scientific journal, with full methodology but preserving the children's identity. In parallel, they would establish a foundation for research and treatment, offering the protocol to underprivileged families. The Light in Their Eyes Foundation, Edward proposed, in honor of the twins, but also for all children who are still waiting for the chance to see. Lucy smiled, moved by the name and its meaning. It's perfect. The scientific publication, when it finally came out, caused the expected furore. Partial reversal of congenital blindness, through synchronized multisensory stimulation, instantly became one of the most discussed and cited articles of that year. Critics certainly emerged, questioning methodology, demanding more data, pointing out limitations, but the evidence was too solid to be ignored. Invitations for lectures and international conferences began to arrive. Lucy, once relegated to the shadows of the academic world, now found herself in the spotlight, this time for celebratory reasons. Edward accompanied her to many of these presentations, proud of her work and the difference she was making. On a particularly significant afternoon, about 15 months after the start of treatment, Lucy was in the garden with the twins. Edward had left to finalize the details of the new foundation, and the boys, now almost 5 years old, were playing at identifying birds in the distance, a visual stimulation exercise that was also a pleasurable game. "That's a robin," Michael exclaimed, pointing to a distant tree. "It has yellow on its belly." "And there are 2 blackbirds at the bird bath," Raphael added. "They're fighting over the water." Lucy watched, marveling at how their descriptions became increasingly precise and detailed. It wasn't just the ability to see, but to interpret what they saw, to give meaning to the images. "Aunt Lucy," Michael called, using the affectionate nickname he had created, "do you think one day we'll see like everyone else?" The question caught Lucy by surprise. It was something everyone avoided discussing directly, the potential limits of their visual recovery. "What matters," she replied carefully, "is that you can already see enough to explore the world, to recognize people and things, to be independent. The vision you have now is already a miracle of science and your determination. But it's not like your vision, is it?" Raphael insisted. "It's different," she admitted. "You see in a special, unique way, and that is no less valuable or less beautiful." The boys seemed to reflect on it for a moment. "I think I like our special way," Michael finally decided. "Because we earned it, it wasn't given as a gift. And because we have a cool story to tell," Raphael added with a smile, "about how Aunt Lucy came to clean our house and ended up cleaning our eyes." Lucy laughed at the unexpected analogy and hugged them both. In that moment, she felt a profound certainty that, regardless of future challenges, they would be fine. They had learned to see not only with their eyes but also with their hearts. When Edward returned late in the afternoon, he found the three of them sitting on the lawn, watching the sunset. It was a sight that still moved him, his children. Once trapped in perpetual darkness, now pointing to the colors of the sky, discussing the shades of orange and red that painted the clouds. He approached silently and sat beside Lucy, taking her hand discreetly. "Everything went well in the meeting," he whispered. "The foundation will be inaugurated next month, and there's something else I want to tell you later." She looked at him with curiosity, but was interrupted by Michael. "Look, Dad, the first star!" the boy exclaimed, pointing to the darkening sky. "Where?" Raphael asked, straining to locate it. "There, right near that cloud that looks like a dragon." Everyone looked up, following Michael's pointed finger. The star, still shy in the twilight sky, shone softly. "Did you know that the stars we see might no longer exist?" Edward asked, joining the conversation. "Their light takes so long to reach us that when we see it, it might just be the glow of something that has already faded." "Like a memory?" Raphael asked, intrigued. "Exactly like a memory," Lucy agreed, "but a memory of light that traveled through the universe just to touch our eyes." The four remained there, contemplating the sky that gradually filled with stars. A family, united not only by ties of blood or love, but by the extraordinary journey they had shared, from darkness to light, from isolation to connection. Later, when the twins were already asleep, Edward led Lucy to the garden again. The night was cool, and the sky, now completely dark, displayed a spectacle of stars. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small velvet box. Lucy opened it with trembling fingers and found a white gold ring with a blue stone. "It's a lapis lazuli," Edward explained. "The ancient Egyptians believed it represented the night sky. I thought it appropriate for someone who brings stars to the eyes of those who only knew darkness." "It's beautiful," she whispered, moved. "Lucy Rivers," he continued, his voice firm despite his evident nervousness, "you have transformed our home, our lives, and my heart. Will you marry me? Not just be part of my children's lives, but mine too, officially, completely." She looked into his eyes, those eyes that, like his children's, had learned to truly see beyond the surface. "Yes," she simply replied. Edward slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her under the starry sky. The circle was complete. The scientist who had entered the Albright mansion as a cleaner, carrying deep scars of failure and rejection, had found not only professional redemption, but also a home, a family, a renewed purpose. 3 months later, in an intimate ceremony in the mansion's garden, now officially transformed into the headquarters of the Light in Their Eyes Foundation, Lucy and Edward married. Michael and Raphael, proudly dressed in identical suits, carried the rings to the altar, their eyes now capable of capturing the beauty of the moment. The story of the former scientist who became a cleaner only to rediscover her calling inspired many. The methodology developed by Lucy, refined through experience with the twins, was made available globally. Children from different countries, with similar conditions, began to receive treatment. Not all achieved the same level of success as Michael and Raphael. Genetic factors, age of treatment onset, and specific conditions of each case influenced the results. But for many, the difference was profound and transformative. The mansion, once a place of silence and isolation, became a vibrant center of research, treatment, and hope. Families came from afar for consultations. Scientists collaborated on new protocols. Students learned about neuroplasticity in the very facilities where it had been so dramatically proven. On a spring morning, 5 years after that fateful first encounter in the treatment room, Lucy observed Michael and Raphael, now 8 years old, playing in the garden with other children, some with normal vision, others at different stages of the treatment protocol. Mr. Anthony, still tending the garden despite now having a team of assistants, approached her. "Who would have thought," Dr. Rivers, the old gardener, commented with a smile, that question about secret passages would lead to all this?" Lucy smiled, recalling the long journey. "Life has its own secret passages. Mr. Anthony, sometimes we need to get lost to find the true path." On the London skyline, the sun shone over the skyscrapers, casting lights and shadows that danced in the eyes of children who, until recently, had only known darkness. It was a constant reminder that, Even in the most unexpected places, even after the greatest falls, light finds its way.